Summer of the Monkeys, Chapter 9. I was so anxious to try out this friend making idea, I tried it all the way home. Instead of going into the house, I went straight to the cellar and filled my pockets with apples. As I was shutting the cellar door, Daisy showed up. Looking very concerned, she said, "Jayberry, if you don't stop feeding our apples to those monkeys, we're not going to have any apples left. I was looking at the barrel this morning, and it's sure going down." "Oh, Daisy," I said, "you're always snooping around. We have plenty of apples." "We don't have," Daisy said. "If you keep feeding them to those monkeys, all you're doing is making them fat." Burning up, I said, "Daisy, if it'll make you feel any better, you can stop worrying about our apples. I probably won't be needing any more because I'm pretty sure that I'll catch those monkeys this time." Daisy giggled and said, "It seems like I've heard that before. How are you going to catch them this time?" "I'm going to make friends with the big monkey," I said. "He's the leader of the pack, and once I get on the good side of him, I believe I can catch every one of them." With a disgusted toss of her head, Daisy said, "Oh, for goodness sakes, Jayberry, you can't make friends with those monkeys. Every time you get close to them, they eat you up." "You just wait and see," I said. "Don't be surprised if you see me coming in with all of those monkeys." Daisy giggled and said, "Jayberry, if I see anything like that, I won't only be surprised, I'll probably faint." "You had just as well start fainting then," I said, "because you're going to see it all right." I wanted to get away from Daisy as soon as I could, but I lost a good 30 minutes having another go-round with Rowdy. He had followed me for a little way, but when he saw I was going toward the bottoms, he sat down on his rear and refused to come along. I tried scolding and shaming him at first, but it did no good. Rowdy just ducked his head and wouldn't even look at me. Then I tried sweet-talking him into going with me, but he wouldn't budge an inch. I got around behind him, lifted up his rear end, and tried pushing him. This didn't work either because Rowdy just simply lay down. I had one trick left, and it was a good one because it had never failed. I sat down, buried my face in my arms, and made a lot of choking, sobbing sounds like I was crying. Rowdy couldn't stand this. He came over, whimpering and whining and licking me all over. I loved him up a little, got to my feet, and walked on. Rowdy came along, but his heart wasn't in it. Instead of staying in front of me, he stayed behind with his tail between his legs. I always felt guilty fooling my old dog that way, but when an idea of going somewhere close to those monkeys without him was something I would never consider. I waited until I was a good way into the bottoms before I started my monkey calling. Taking an apple from my pocket, I held it out in front of me and called, "Here, Jimbo, come on, boy. I have an apple for you." I never felt so silly in my life. I was blushing all over and could almost feel 100 people watching me. Not seeing or hearing anything, I walked a little way on the game trail, stopped, and started calling again. "Here, Jimbo. Here you are, boy. Come on now." The only thing my calling attracted this time was an old hog that nearly scared me to death. With a loud grunt, he took off through the bottoms, popping the brush. "Rowdy," I said with a quavering voice, "what's the matter with that old crazy hog? He must think I'm a bear or something." Grumbling to myself about how scary hogs were, I walked on a little way, stopped, and started calling again. "Come on, Jimbo. I'm over here. Come on now." Rowdy couldn't understand what was going on. He knew that I was calling something, but I wasn't using his name, and he was all mixed up. On hearing him whimper, I looked over behind me and saw him sitting on his rear in the game trail with his ears standing straight up, looking at me with a puzzled expression in his friendly old eyes. Still burning up with that old hog scaring me, I said, "Rowdy, if you keep looking at me like that, I'll send you to the house. It may sound crazy to you, but I'm calling a monkey, and I don't know any other way to call one." I was walking along, calling, looking, and listening for monkeys, when all at once I smelled something. It was the sweet, sour odor that I recognized right away, for I had smelled it before. Somewhere close by there was a whiskey still, and what I was smelling was the odor of fermenting sour mash. "Rowdy," I said, "some moonshiners set up a whiskey still down here in the bottoms. I bet it belongs to those Gravely boys. They couldn't sleep good if they didn't have an old whiskey still stuck around somewhere. I found several stills while I was prowling the hills and river bottoms, but I always kept my mouth shut about finding them. I had learned that it wasn't a good idea for anyone to start babbling about the location of a whiskey still. The moonshiners didn't like it at all. I always figured that I had enough trouble of my own and didn't care to have a bunch of moonshiners chasing me all over the country. I was standing there, sniffing the air to locate the direction of the whiskey still so I could stay away from it, when I heard that Jimbo monkey let out a loud squall. Then I heard the little monkeys screeching and chattering and making all kinds of racket. "Listen to that, Rowdy," I said. "That's the most noise I've heard those monkeys make. They must really be having a good time. I wonder what they're doing now." Leaving the game trail, I started picking my way through the underbrush in the direction of the commotion. As I walked along, I noticed the odor of the whiskey mash getting stronger and stronger. I found the monkeys and the whiskey still at the same time. I was so shocked by what I saw, I dropped the apple I was holding in my hand. I just stood there with my mouth open, looking things over and trying to figure out what was going on. Jimbo was standing up close to the mash barrel with a tin can in one paw and holding on to the rim of the barrel with the other paw. He was looking straight at us and didn't seem to be either mad or scared. Taking my eyes off Jimbo, I looked at the little monkeys. They were milling around the whiskey still, screeching, chattering, and chasing each other. They seemed to be having a lot of fun. Some were lying on the ground, rolling over and over and kicking up dust. They didn't seem to care the least bit about Rowdy and me being there. "Rowdy," I whispered, "there's something wrong with these monkeys. They're not acting right." Just then, one little monkey, no bigger than a small cat, climbed up onto the rim of the mash barrel. He stood there for a second, squealing his head off, and then leaned over and kerplunk, he fell in the barrel. This scared me because I could just see a $2 bill drowning itself in a whiskey mash barrel. I was just about to dash over and lend the little fellow a helping hand, then Jimbo let out a squall, darted over to the barrel, reached in with his long arm, caught the little monkey by the scruff of the neck, lifted him out, and set him down on the ground. The little monkey was a mess. He was sopping wet, covered with foam from fermenting mash. Immediately, about a dozen other monkeys darted over and started licking him all over. The little fellow was just squatted there on the ground, all humped up, with his eyes closed, and let the other monkeys lick away. I was laughing and watching what was going on, then I realized why the monkeys were acting so strangely. "Holy smokes, Rowdy," I said. "No wonder these monkeys are acting so funny. They've been drinking that sour mash, and they're all drunk. Look at them." I wasn't too surprised because I knew that practically all animals were fond of the stuff that went into making of sour mash. Rowdy was watching the monkeys, and I could tell by his actions that no matter if they were drunk or sober, he wasn't having anything to do with them. Picking up the apple I dropped, I said, Rowdy, you stay here. I'm going to see if I can make friends with Jimbo. But I'll tell you one thing, if those monkeys jump on me and you run out on me, I'll make you sleep in the corn crib with Daisy's cats for 90 days and nights. Rowdy couldn't get along with cats at all. Holding the apple out towards Jimbo, I took a few steps and said, "Come on, Jimbo, look what I've got. Look what I've brought you. Come on now, let's be friends." Jimbo didn't make a move. He just stood there, holding the tin can in his paw, blinking his eyes and looking first at me and then at the apple. I was so scared I was shaking like a corn tassel in a high wind. If Jimbo had opened his big mouth and jumped at me, I would have fainted dead away. But I had the feeling that he had recognized his name, and he was more curious than mad. Taking a few more steps toward him, I said, "Come on, Jimbo, here's an apple for you. Come on now. I'm not going to hurt you." This time I got a little reaction out of Jimbo. Bouncing up and down on his short, stubby legs, he pushed out his rubbery lips and in the shape of an O and grunted a few times. I smiled at him. "I don't know what you're saying, Jimbo, but whatever it is, it sounds like it's all right to me. Just don't get mad now and everything will be all right." With my confidence built up, I eased over quite close to Jimbo, held the apple out to him and said, "Look what I brought you, Jimbo. Come on now, let's stop fighting each other and be friends. I'm not going to hurt you." As if he were trying to read my mind, Jimbo just stood there with no expression at all on his face, looking me straight in the eye. Then, dropping the tin can he was holding with his paw, he reached over and took the apple from my hand. I wouldn't have been more pleased if I'd found a bottle with a genie in it. All the time that Jimbo was eating the apple, I kept talking to him. I told him what a smart monkey he was and how much I'd like to be his friend. Because I had given him an apple, Jimbo decided he wanted to give me something. He picked up the tin can, reached down in the barrel, filled it full of sour mash, and offered it to me. I smiled and said, "That's all right, Jimbo. You don't owe me a thing. Besides, I don't think I'd like that stuff." My refusing to take the can of sour mash made Jimbo madder than I had ever seen him. He threw the can to the ground and started grunting, squalling, bouncing all over the place. Then he started throwing sticks and dirt at me and everything else he could get his paws on. Some of the little monkeys came over to show their dislike of me. They stood up on their skinny hind legs, screeching and chattering and showing their teeth. By refusing Jimbo's offering of sour mash, you would have thought I had committed the one sin that was unforgivable by all monkeys. I backed off to one side and waited until the monkeys quieted down. Then I started talking to Jimbo again. "I don't know what you're getting mad for, Jimbo," I said. "I didn't do anything. Come on now, let's not fight each other. Let's be friends." There was one thing I could say for Jimbo. He had a lot of determination. He picked up that can, filled it full of mash, and again offered it to me. I would no more have refused that can of sour mash this time than Santa Claus could have whipped one of his reindeers. The last thing in the world I wanted to do was make Jimbo mad. I didn't figure that I would have to drink it anyway. I just figured that if I took it, Jimbo would be satisfied and everything would be all right. How wrong I was. Jimbo didn't seem to like the idea of my just standing there holding the can of mash in my hand. He started getting mad again. Looking at me straight in the eye, waving his long arms in the air, he started grunting and squalling. It was plain to see that he wanted me to drink some of the stuff. All right, Jimbo," I said in desperation. "Don't get mad again. If it'll make you feel any better, I'll have a little drink with you." I tipped the can up and took a couple of swallows. Jimbo couldn't have been any more pleased than he would have been if he had just found a bushel of apples. He grunted, clapped his paws, and turned a few somersaults. At first, the sour mash tasted so nasty that I thought I was going to get sick. Then, all at once, it didn't taste so nasty anymore. My tongue and throat started to tingle and tickle, and my stomach got as warm as eggs in an incubator. I burped a couple of times and said to no one in particular, "Well, what do you know? That stuff doesn't taste half bad as I thought it would." I sat down on the stump, tipped the can up, and took about 3 swallows that time. From the brush where we were hiding, Rowdy could see that I was getting along all right with the monkeys. He came crawling out of the brush on his stomach, heading straight for me. He was always jealous if I talked to or petted any kind of animal. He couldn't even stand to see me petting an old hog or a cat. I held my breath and watched to see what the monkeys would do. They kept their eyes on Rowdy but made no effort to jump on him. In every way he could, Rowdy was showing those monkeys that he was the friendliest hound dog in the world. His long tail was fanning in the air, and he was whimpering and inching along the ground 1 foot at a time. He was a very pleased dog when he finally made it over to me all in one piece and sat down by my side. To show Rowdy that he also wanted to be friends, Jimbo found another can, filled it full of mash, and set it down on the ground right in front of his nose. Rowdy always did figure that anything I ate or drank was plenty good enough for him. He leaned over and stuck the tip of his pink tongue, into the sour mash and then looked at me. "You see, Rowdy," I said, "that stuff doesn't taste half bad, does it? Go ahead and help yourself." Rowdy must have liked the taste of sour mash, for he lapped up the whole can. Jimbo was the best bartender there ever was. Every time our cans were emptied, he saw to it that they were filled again. By this time I was feeling good, so I wanted to sing. Waving the can of sour mash and tapping the ground with my foot, I sang all the songs I knew and made up a few more. Because I was singing, Rowdy decided that he too would sing a little. Lifting his old head high in the air, he started howling a hound dog tune. Not to be left out of any of the merrymaking, the monkeys gathered around us, screeching and chattering. Jimbo danced all over the place, clapping his paws, squalling, grunting, and turning somersaults. The first thing I knew, monkeys were climbing all over me. They poked around in my ears with tickly little fingers, explored my eyes, nose, and mouth. I had a giggle fit when they ran their arms down the back of my shirt. Rowdy was going through the same thing I was. Monkeys were all around him, looking through his hair on his body as if they were searching for fleas. They lifted up his long floppy ears and peered down in them. They played with his tail, crawled up on his back, lifted up his lips, and inspected his teeth. Rowdy was really enjoying his newfound friends. With friendly whimpers, he was lapping every monkey he could reach with his little long pink tongue. I never knew when I went to sleep, but I sure knew when I woke up. It was late in the evening, and I was cold as a bullfrog. My stomach felt as if I'd swallowed a handful of cockleburrs, and I was sicker than I'd ever been in my life. My head felt as big as a wagon wheel. It was pounding and throbbing. I felt like I was going to split wide open any second. I could see very well, and what I could see, I couldn't see very well, and what I could see seemed to be all out of focus. There must have been 100 different trees in the bottoms, but all looked alike to me. Every one of them was leaning way over sideways. I thought that if I could close my eyes and give my head a good shake, it might straighten things out a little. I tried it and squalled like a stepped-on cat with pain. My head felt as if it had exploded, and I was sure that my eyeballs had popped right out onto the ground. I couldn't understand why I was so cold. My teeth were chattering, and I had goosebumps all over me. When I finally did discover why I was so cold, I jumped straight up and hollered in a loud voice, "Hey, my breeches are gone!" I still had my shirt and my shorts, but that didn't cover up very much because Mama never did make my shirts long enough. I looked all around for my breeches, but they were nowhere to be seen. Rowdy was lying on the ground about 5 feet away, sound asleep. "Rowdy," I said in a loud voice, "wake up. You're a heck of a watchdog. You laid there sound asleep and let someone steal my breeches. Wake up now and help me find them before someone sees me like this." Rowdy got to his feet, but then he just groaned and lay down again. He didn't seem to care if I found my breeches or not. "I know you're sick, Rowdy," I said, "but you're not any sicker than I am. Now you get up from there and help me find my breeches. It'll soon be dark, and I can't be running around in these bottoms half naked like this." Rowdy got to his feet again, but he made no effort to walk. He just stood there, stiff as a board, with his head down and his legs spraddled out. I started over to see if I could help him, but something went wrong. I couldn't seem to walk straight. I kept angling off to one side. I missed Rowdy by a good 5 feet and had to grab hold of a sapling to keep from falling down. I was drunk, and that's all there was to it. After a lot of grunting and whimpering, Rowdy got his feet to working and started over to see if he could help me a little, but he seemed to be in about the same shape as I was in. He wobbled all over the place, and his rear end kept trying to get ahead of his front end. "Boy, Rowdy," I said, holding my throbbing head in my hands, "I didn't know that sour mash could make a fella feel like this. I thought it had to be made into whiskey first before it could make you drunk." I had forgotten all about the monkeys, and when they did cross my mind, I started looking for them. I looked all around the whiskey still and up in the trees, but there wasn't a monkey around. It was so still in the bottoms that all I could hear was the gurgling of sour mash fermenting in the barrels. The very sound of that stuff gurgling made me sicker than ever. "Rowdy," I said, "I can't understand where my breeches went. I don't think anyone would want them because they were patched all over. I wonder if that Jimbo monkey took them off me and ran away with them. I bet anything that's what happened. Now I know why he kept pouring sour mash down us. He wanted to get us drunk so he could take my breeches." Up until that time, I hadn't given much thought about how I was going to explain to Mama about losing my breeches. When I did think about it, I got really shook up. There just wasn't any way that I could explain anything like that to Mama. As far back as I could remember, Rowdy and I had run along those game trails like two wild deer, but on that day, the trails didn't seem to be any bigger than a string of twine. The only way I could stay on top of it was by holding the brushes on each side. Rowdy was behind me and was having all kinds of trouble. He just couldn't seem to keep himself pointed in the right direction. We finally made it to the rail fence around our field, and there we ran into another problem. Rowdy and I had jumped that old rail fence 1,000 times, but that day the fence looked like it was 20 feet high. Rowdy didn't even try to jump the fence. He found a wide place between two rails, low to the ground, and wiggled his way through. I made it to the top of the fence in pretty good shape. Then something went wrong. I got dizzy and fell off. For a few seconds, I thought sure that I had broken my neck. When I finally reached the gate going into our yard, I thought I had made it. But just as I opened the gate, all my luck ran off and left me. Daisy came around the corner of the house on her crutch, humming a silly little tune. She took one look at me there, half naked, and by the expression on her face, you would have thought that she had stepped on a snake. Her mouth flew open and she gasped like she had swallowed a butterfly. "J. Barry," she said in a loud voice, Where on earth are your breeches? It's not very nice to run around half naked like that. What's the matter with you anyway?" I didn't say a word. There wasn't anything I could say. I just groaned way down deep, wrapped both arms around the gatepost, and held on. Daisy came over, peered at me, and said, "Jay Barry, you're as white as an egg. Are you sick?" "Sick?" I said. "Daisy, I'm sicker than I've ever been in my life. I think I'm going to die." When I told Daisy I thought I was dying, it scared her. She caught hold of my arm and said, "Here, let me help you get into the house." Before I could unwind myself from the gatepost, Daisy turned loose of my arm, stepped back, and said, "Phew, what's that smell?" I didn't say anything and wouldn't even look at her. Daisy stuck her nose up close to me and started sniffing. With a frown on her face, she stepped back and said in a disgusted voice, "Jay Barry, you're not sick, you're drunk. You smell just like an old whiskey bottle." "I can't help it if I'm drunk," I said. "I'm sick just the same." Looking toward the house, Daisy yelled in a voice louder than I had ever heard her yell, "Mama! Mama! Come and look at Jay Barry. He's as drunk as a boiled owl and naked as a jaybird." Mama must have had pots in her hands when she heard Daisy yell, because I heard something hit the floor with a loud bang and clatter its way across the floor. I wanted to run, but I knew if I turned loose of that fence post, I would probably fall flat on my face. Mama came sailing out of the house, looking more surprised than she did the time she found the young hoot owl I'd picked under an old sitting hen and had just hatched a bunch of chicks. In the late evening shadows, with me being hugged up so close to the fence post, Mama didn't see me right away. She looked at Daisy and said, "Daisy, what did you say?" "Look at him, Mama," Daisy said, pointing her finger at me. "He's so drunk he's cross-eyed, and he's lost his breeches. Can you imagine anything like that?" "No," Mama said in a slow, cold voice. "I can't imagine anything like that." "Go smell him, Mama," Daisy said. "He smells like an old whiskey bottle, and you can see for yourself that he's lost his breeches." With a deep frown on her face and an uncertain look in her eyes, Mama came and looked me over from head to my feet. She grabbed me by my arm, shook me a little, and said in a very hard voice, "Jay Barry, are you drunk?" "I guess I am, Mama," I said, "but I didn't mean to." "Didn't mean to?" Mama shouted. "What kind of excuse is that? Who gave you that whiskey anyway? You tell me now. Somebody is going to get into trouble over this. Did those Gravely boys get you drunk?" "I haven't seen the Gravely boys, Mama," I said. "That Jimbo monkey got me drunk." "Oh, for heaven's sake, Jay Barry," Mama said. "You don't expect me to believe that, do you?" "It's the truth, Mama," I said. "There's a whiskey still down in the bottoms. That's where I found the monkeys. They were drinking sour mash, and I guess I had a few drinks with them. I didn't know that stuff could make you drunk." "What happened to your breeches?" Mama asked. "I don't know, Mama," I said. "I went to sleep, and when I woke up, they were gone. I think that Jimbo monkey got away with them." Just then, Daisy let out a squeal and said, "Look, Mama, Rowdy's drunk too." Poor old Rowdy. He could tell by the tone in Mama's voice that the fat was in the fire, and he was trying very hard to disappear altogether. He was trying his best to get under the porch. Mama looked at Rowdy, and then, looking up to the heavens, she closed her eyes and said, "Dear Lord, what have I done to deserve this?" Grabbing me by the left ear, Mama said, "Come on, young man, you're going to bed. Your monkey hunting days are over. I've had all I can take." Mama wasn't any too gentle about putting me to bed. She just kind of wadded me up and crammed me down under the covers. I fell asleep immediately. I woke up sometime during the night hearing Mama talking to Papa, and she sounded as if she was real upset. I heard her say, "As far as I know, he's never lied to me. but I just can't believe that a bunch of monkeys could get a boy drunk. I still think someone put him up to the got him drunk. Papa laughed and said, "No, I don't think so. I knew there's a still down there in the bottoms because while I was working the fields, if the wind was high and just right, if the wind was right, I could smell the sour mash." Mama said, "I don't care if there's 100 stills down there. Whoever heard of a bunch of monkeys getting a boy drunk?" "It probably happened just like that, just like he said it did," Papa said. "Those monkeys found that still, and you know as well as I do that all animals love sour mash. It's made of everything that animals like: sugar, corn, malt, yeast. There's probably more to this than we know. I'll have a talk with him in the morning and find out all about it." "You had better talk to him," Mama said. "I don't think I can take any more of this monkey business. Why, if that monkey is as smart as everyone seems to think he is, he might catch Jay Berry down on the river and drown him." Papa laughed and said, "Oh, I don't think anything like that's going to happen. Mama never should have said anything about Jimbo drowning me after I went back to sleep. I had a horrible dream. I dreamed that the monkeys caught Rowdy and me down in the bottoms. Then they threw us down a deep well that was about half full of ice water. Rowdy and I were swimming for our lives. I could see all the monkeys looking down at us laughing. I woke up swimming all over my bed."